Hello, everyone. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name's James, and I'm quite happy because Tottenham haven't ruined my weekend
Tottenham
yet.
haven't ruined your weekend. Well, they'll ruin your week, mate.
Yeah, it just make
They'll
it a
ruin
shit
your
start to the
week.
next week instead.
Yeah, indeed. Not only that, you've got a wicked weekend away planned. Father and son time.
Oh yeah, yes. I'll be in
Preston.
Lancashire. I'll be in Preston on Saturday for probably Tottenham will ruin my Monday, then they'll go out probably the FA Cup on Saturday night and just completely ruin everything. Yeah. Anyway.
Anyhow, another weekend is almost done. 9 games in. It did feel like quite a slow FPL weekend, James, because I had obviously Triple City, double Manchester United, double Arsenal, all playing yesterday, and then I've still got one Spurs and one Fulham. So very early days yet to be counting whether it's a good week or a bad week. But up till
There's
now,
one game to go.
well,
right.
yeah, but depending on the ownership between them, like Kane's got quite high ownership, Mitrovic maybe a little bit, Pereira a little bit. But I mean, overall, it is a bad week because it's a red arrow, and a red arrow is a bad week. I have had 4 in a row.
Oh, that's good. Mine's probably more. Actually, no, I did okay on Unlimited for a couple of weeks, and yeah, it's been a bad couple of weeks. I mean, I'm on a red this week, but I could still end on a green. What points you on?
I have 69, James, and
Oh,
I've
lovely
gone from
jubbly.
840k to 852k. So it's not the biggest drop, but it is a drop nonetheless. But of course, with João Cancelo's no-show, I have Ben White's 0-pointer to come off the bench. So, add that on as well.
Guess what? That makes 2 of us, sweetheart. Who have you got tonight?
Andreas Pereira, I started him, and Harry Kane as well.
Okay. So you're 3 ahead of me. I've got Kane and Mitrovic.
Oof.
So you're 3 ahead of me, and I've got Mitrovic versus your Pereira. Yes, I've got Harry Kane as well. I'm on 66.
You didn't take any hits, did you? We rolled. We were rolling.
Yeah, absolutely rolled. And for those who made transfers and were successful and want to tell everyone, amazing. But for every Karu Mitoma story, there's a Solly March falling over himself 8 yards in front of goal story as well. But well done. If it was the right thing for you and you made a transfer, you know what I always say, play it your way, right? I'm at 66, transfer rolled. Yes, returns for double Newcastle defensive. Well, that's not true, is it? It's just Botman clean sheet. De Bruyne 6-pointer, Rashford 7, Haaland captaincy. I mean, look, I've got 2 of my most threatening players playing tonight in Kane and Mitrovic, and if it's a 3-2 to Tottenham, that'd be okay with me. If Mitrovic scores and Kane hat-trick.
So the difference is Kepa in goal for me, mate. Kepa
He's killed me.
With
He's
a
killed
9-pointer. What a beast.
He's actually going to go down as probably my worst transfer of the season, selling him last week. But I did a piece for the advanced tiers after the Liverpool-Chelsea game on Saturday night, and I was saying that, look, you look back on that moment after Chelsea lost at Fulham, they'd lost to City, they got a draw at Forest, weren't good, and you're looking at it going, these ain't keeping clean sheets. Maybe it was the fact that there was some nice fixtures there, like Bournemouth beforehand and stuff. Not that he wasn't good value, but it's like the double's gone. He hasn't done a lot for me in the double. Okay, fine. I'll take the -4. De Gea's potentially got 2 doubles in the next 3. This seems to make logical sense. It's a Sky fault, right? Oh, 5 fixtures versus 3. Is this worth a 4 points hit? Yeah, possibly. Oh, and United maybe have some better fixtures afterwards, for example, as well. But yeah, that's been a painful one. And those who kept Kepa, 19 points over the last 2 game weeks, you're delighted. And if I've had them 19 points, then I'm looking at greens for the last 2 weeks rather than reds. But it's not, in terms of the difference, I'm just trying to think. I mean, I started Ward this week, so I went all in strategy. He and De Gea both scored 1 point, so that didn't make no difference. I did De Gea the week before, and he got 5 to what Kepa's 10. So I was 5 down, plus the other -4 down. So I was 9 down last week. And I'd be, what did he get this week? 9. So another 8 down. So 17 points.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The difference for me.
Well, look,
you don't expect that in 2 weeks for a player you've sold.
No. Yeah, I mean, Chelsea's double clean sheets. What can you do? Interesting weekend of football as well. Like, obviously, we're going to go and run down the games, which is why you guys tune in and why you enjoy the show. So we talk about some of the football at the weekend. We do have the FA Cup this week, and we also have the Carabao Cup semi-finals this week and next. So FA Cup being sandwiched in between them before game week 22 kicks off, James. As you said on previous shows, we will know what the blank in 25 looks like, and we will know what game week 28 looks like as well. And that may affect people's decisions. We have a provisional double game week next game week. Manchester United and Leeds added, probably asterisk, depending on the FA Cup. And who knows, more double game weeks could be added as well.
Yep.
So this is very much a case of let's review what's happened and then put our feet up and watch some giant killings, hopefully.
There's a no, not this. You've got Derby Monday night.
Derby away Monday night.
I'm not sure you want to see any either. There's one more big thing on top of that as well. So I mean, in terms of things that we can learn this week, you're exactly right. Carabao Cup final, FA Cup 5th round participants, and the draw for the 6th round. So we know what 25 will look like. Almost definitely. There's some caveats to that, which I'll cover on the Chip Strategy podcast we do next Thursday. We'll know the probability of how game week 28 is going to look. We'll potentially know new fixtures is not impossible. Absolutely, before 22 deadline, we could find out about.
Well, they're due this Friday, right? So,
well, the TV fixtures are.
Oh, TV fixtures.
I don't think that's gonna, and I don't think the TV fixture will be this Friday. By the way, I think they'll wait till next week. That's the March television selections, which can have some implications. For example, if for certain fixtures on Monday night, you know, a team's not suddenly probably going to have a midweek fixture that week. For example, I'll give you a hypothetical one. I think Liverpool Wolves could probably go into 26, but if Sky decide, right, we're going to put Man United on the Liverpool Man United on the Monday night, and Liverpool Wolves isn't going into that midweek, where it's at least highly unlikely suddenly, for example. So that can have a minor impact. And also transfer window shuts, mate.
That's the big one. Yeah. Well,
so like, I'll give you an example.
I think it's probably your club and mine. We're just not excited about buying anyone or likely to be linked by. So but transfer window's kind of back in my mind, but yeah.
I mean, there might be a player like, for example, that no one would talk about now, who maybe people will be talking about next week. I'll give you an example like Jed Spence. Jed Spence is probably going somewhere in the Premier League on loan, and it might be that people are looking. I would have no problem with you going and playing on loan for you till the end of the season. I think that'd be a pretty decent move for him, particularly if you were going to stick with a back three like you did at the weekend. So there's so many things that you look at now. You wouldn't buy Jed Spence now, would you? But you might look at it next week and go, oh, shit. Okay, the cup final is United Newcastle. I need a cheap enabler to cover me for game week 25. Oh, West Ham have Nottingham Forest at home. And if he's gone there, it might suddenly be on your radar, for example. So honestly,
we should add that I haven't heard a single rumor or link with Jed Spence coming to us. I just know that we need a right wing back, and he was a name that me and a few friends that were watching the game on Saturday talked about.
No, his name has been mentioned with you.
Oh, has it?
Yeah. Honestly,
maybe on the Spurs blogs, not on the West Ham ones, but I'd have him in a heartbeat.
It sounds like probably Southampton might be the most likely destination, I think. But yeah, it's not improbable. Anyway, that it probably doesn't happen, but it's just an example of something.
Exactly.
This week, more than any other week across the whole season, please don't make a transfer early. There is so much information to learn over the next 10, 11 days. And yeah, there's another reason for you, as I kind of dipped in. We can do another Chip Strategy podcast next Thursday, once the Carabao Cup semi-finals are finished, and we've got the whole picture, and we can cover it for you, and we'll look and compare if Rashford's best for triple captaincy and what alternatives are and potential doubles down the line and blanks, exactly as we did the other week. We're going to go through it all again, just with even more information and a better understanding, basically.
Yeah. Cool. Let's cover off some of these games then. It wasn't the most exciting Premier League weekend of action necessarily. I mean, there was a few very good games. I mean, the one that finished off the weekend yesterday, Arsenal Man United, was worth it in itself. But from my point of view, the relegation zone, I mean, Bournemouth and Forest drawing perfect, Leicester drawing perfect, Southampton losing perfect, and obviously we beat Everton. So the bottom half of the table was as good as I could have hoped for from West Ham's point of view. But it wasn't. Yep.
Man United lost. Newcastle, Liverpool, Chelsea, Brighton all drew.
So you done all right as well, but you got to win today.
Yeah, but we'll fuck it up tonight, won't we?
You got to win today to make it worthwhile. So top 4 races worked out maybe for Spurs as well. Well, shit. Hang on. Is there going to be a happy Tottenham this week for
I don't. Even if we win tonight, I think there's way too many issues at Tottenham for it to be happy, mate.
Okay, good. So Liverpool Chelsea, I didn't get to watch this game. I was on making my way to.
Weren't you lucky?
But it didn't inspire me at all. I mean, I just had a sneaky that it would be a bit of a 0-0. Thinking about captain Thiago Silva in Sky, and you were like, Liverpool always score at home. I was like, yeah, they do, but it has the hoodoo has to break sometime, and they well, I say hoodoo, the kind of run. It's not a negative thing that they score at home all the time. Was it as dull as a 0-0, or were there chances? I know Havertz, I saw, had a goal disallowed.
I mean, Chelsea had a couple of really big chances in the first half. Obviously, that one doesn't count. The offside. But if Thiago Silva puts it in the first instance when it hits the post, that goes in, the goal stands. Havertz is deemed offside. It's a really strange one because he's behind Silva, but his left foot is ahead of the ball when Thiago Silva shoots. Therefore, he's ahead of the ball. But it's a weird one because he's behind his teammate. And you can certainly understand from Havertz's perspective why he thinks he's onside.
Onside.
Correct decision, yes. And Badiashile had another great chance from a set piece later in the first half as well. And Liverpool had big problems in that first half in terms of defending set pieces. No Matip playing, obviously no Van Dijk as well. You've lost quite a bit of presence. And Fabinho didn't play either. So you're taking quite a bit of presence out of that in terms of defending set pieces situations.
Well, I mean, you're looking at it and you're thinking Gomez, Konate, Milner. You could argue a case that maybe they're all second choice. Maybe not Konate, Keita, Bajcetic, Harvey Elliott, even Gakpo isn't what you'd call first choice full strength. When you look at that Liverpool team, you get the fear factor. You're like, actually, you know what? These haven't got their full strength team out. If there's ever a day we're going to go against them and maybe have a chance, this is it. Psychologically, when you see the team sheet, it does sometimes lift you, doesn't it? When you see a star man's out for whatever reason.
At the last time, by the way, Liverpool failed to score at Anfield, because you did ask me on Saturday. I said they always score at home. The last time they failed to score at home in a domestic competitive game was the League Cup semi-final first leg against Arsenal last January.
Right.
It does feel like they always score at Anfield, and that's correct. I've just run through it. Both teams just give the ball away a lot, Suj, to be honest. They played each other in the 2 cup finals last year, and they both finished 0-0. And both games were absolutely brilliant in terms of quality. I mean, the first half of the FA Cup final was madness how it got to 0-0 at halftime. This was really, really short on quality. And you could tell both are suffering from absentees. But I mean, it was quite something when I forget the name of the commentators, Steve Fletcher, maybe, Darren Fletcher. He said midway through the game, he said, this feels like a typical mid-table clash. Wow. And actually, he was right. It was, because the quality levels were way lower than what we'd normally expect from Liverpool and Chelsea. And that there's mitigating circumstances for both. And I think there's actually some positives that both teams can take out of this. First is it's back-to-back clean sheets for Liverpool, which was obviously Wolves away in the Cup and then Chelsea at home at the weekend. And yeah, sure, Liverpool escaped a little bit in the first half with those set-piece issues. But certainly where they didn't have an issue so much was obviously ball over the top and stuff. And I think they might be dropping off a little bit. I said that this is what they should do. And what I've seen over the last 2 games suggests that it might be happening. Because when Chelsea had open play opportunities in the second half, it was more about switches of play rather than someone running through in behind. And look, sure, you can say Havertz isn't necessarily the quickest to get in behind. Chelsea fans will point out that his goal in the Champions League final against City shows that he can do it. So Liverpool didn't have big problems over the top, which is interesting. And it might actually be, ridiculously, that there might be some better defensive numbers coming for them if this sticks a little bit. Of course, the drawback is if they do that, actually going to be less exciting going forward. Mo Salah's now gone 3 Premier League games in a row without a shot on target. Now, that's happened before. It's happened before a few times, but it also feels unusual. He doesn't look like he's going to score at the moment.
No.
By the way, neither did his teammates. Harvey Elliott played as the left-sided forward, which changed once obviously Darwin Núñez came on, what was interesting about that was Nunes went on the left side of the front three rather than through the middle with Gakpo moving out. I don't want to criticise Gakpo because he's just got in the football club, but I'm not sure he's going to be to the required level that Liverpool expect of a team that's going to challenge for the league. Is my honest opinion. Now, listen, he's young, certainly can develop, and there's not been anything wrong with his performances. I'm just not sure if he's going to be to the level that Liverpool expect. It looks like Klopp would like to use him in the Firmino role. And so, therefore, further on in the season, have we got Nunes, Jota, and Diaz all competing for the left side spot, Gakpo and Firmino through the middle, and Salah through the right. And then you go, oh, Salah's safe. But at the moment, those who've still got are certainly going to be thinking about selling. That said, the next two, Wolves and Everton, are quite interesting. And I've already mentioned that he's on my radar because I think there's every chance they'll have a double in 26, which is part where I don't really want to lose Kevin De Bruyne at the moment because that's just an easy...
The sideways move.
Exactly that, if obviously that eventuality happens. Yeah, they're obviously not in a good place at the moment, Liverpool. And neither are Chelsea, which is more understandable because of the injury list and also the adding of the new players. I just feel, though, that of the two teams, they're the more likely to suddenly go on a run. They've got good home fixtures. We've got Fulham, Southampton, Leeds, Everton all at home between now and the March internationals. They also go to West Ham, Tottenham and Leicester. They're 3 winnable away games as well. Whereas you look at Liverpool in there, I've got to go to St James's. I've got United at home. It's a little bit of a tougher run. And Chelsea might be reinvigorated by these new signings. I didn't watch the game against Palace last week. And I know they had some moments where they were a little bit fortuitous. But I was very impressed with Benoit Badiashile. He played really well as left-sided centre-back. They played a hybrid system that was basically between a back four and a back three, which centred around 3 different players playing 2 positions. So Chalobah played right-sided centre-back and right-back. Cucurella played left-back and left wing-back. And Ziyech played right wing-back and right-sided forward. And that enabled them to shift between the 2 systems. That's something we're quite familiar with Potter's Brighton historically. And obviously the boy Mudryk, who came on, what a talent he is. And it's all prospect at the moment, but he's got dancing feet, blistering pace. If he faces you up one-on-one, he's got the ability to do lollipops and tricks that will beat a man. He works hard. I did some analysis last week on Talking Tactics, and that was one of the things that came out was this isn't a lazy player. Like, he'll go and press off the ball and stuff as well. So I think he's a great addition for Chelsea. And I genuinely think we should have him on radar already for FPL. You know his price, Suj?
It was his 8 million?
7.
Midfielder, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, understandable. That's not a bad price at all.
I'm not suggesting anyone goes and buys him now.
No.
But I think he should be on radar for everybody because everyone's going to have players at around about that price bracket, right? You've got Rashfords, you've got Martinelli's, Odegaard's, whatever. I really think he should be on radar because I think he's one as well that if he has a good game week, I think people steam into him quite quickly with the fixtures Chelsea have got.
Yeah. We had the 1-1 draw between Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest. Again, like obviously Forest brought in Chris Wood and we were talking about Scarpa maybe playing in that number 10 role, but now you've got Brendan Johnson and Chris Wood and Gibbs White and he was the one that ended up missing out and dropping out. Maybe he might not quite hold on to his shirt, and Gibbs White will play that number 10 role with 2 strikers, but for Nottingham Forest moving forward. Bournemouth, still no Marcus Tavernier.
No, and obviously no Dominic Solanke, no Lewis Cook. They changed the makeup of the back line as well, where Adam Smith came back in from suspension, which we knew. Lloyd Kelly moved from left back to left-sided centre-back. Jack Stevens played. Jordan Zamora played at left-back. So they completely overhauled basically the whole back four that played at Brentford. They had a debut for Dango Utura, who obviously assisted Jadon Anthony's goal, and apparently the pair of them were very lively. Utara's quick. That was the main thing that came out of the weekend in the messages was he's quick. Joe Rothwell, who was a player I looked at quite closely in pre-season, actually, because his numbers at Blackburn were quite interesting. He obviously came in with an injury. I want to say that's probably his first Premier League start. Whether he'll keep his place going forward to be determined, but I don't think we'd be looking at him as an FPL asset now, considering the amount of options we have at that enabling price, for example. They're missing Solanke, certainly, because I think, unfortunately, with Moore, it becomes very much about the delivery in the box. Now, admittedly, he himself missed a header in the first half that normally he would put away with his eyes closed, and he's managed to head it over. But performance was better for Bournemouth. I guess all them changes give them a little bit of a reinvigorated feeling. The problem is, you look at their fixture, it's a little bit like Palace. You look at their fixture and you think, Christ almighty, by the time you have another good one, you might be finished here. That's the concern. But it was better from them at the weekend. I said to you on the differential show on Patreon on Friday that I thought this Chris Wood signing was a little bit strange, because I just don't think he fits into the tactical setup in terms of running down the channels and stuff. I mean, if you look at his heat map from the weekend, okay, it's not exceptional and nothing particularly stands out, but it's certainly a lean towards the left-hand side more than you would expect from a Chris Wood type player. So I'd wondered if it became more about Gibbs White and Johnson behind Wood, which I think if you're going to play a forward like Wood was a better setup, rather than expect him to be running in the channels as a split forward. I just felt there's nothing wrong with Chris Wood as a target man forward and stuff. It's decent. I just felt that it was a player that didn't fit with the profile of the way Nottingham Forest have been playing recently. And it's also meant that Scarpa's come out of the team. And he looks like he's a good talent, good technician, can find the pass and stuff. They've also brought another player in, Danilo, who come on at half-time as well, who they'll want to fit into this system as well. They've spent decent money on. And with Nottingham Forest not having a cup game at the weekend, I suspect they'll probably want to go and buy someone else just out of boredom, won't they? But yeah, I'm interested to see how that develops with Chris Wood. There's nothing wrong with him as a player. There's nothing wrong with Nottingham Forest buying him. I just think if they're going to continue to play this way, which is with the forward split, don't think Chris Wood fits the profile. That's just my take on it. He'd be better off. They've either got to get closer together, which you can do it, or he plays up front on his own with the couple behind. We said that we thought Forest would go on a run. They're probably at the stage where they're probably disappointed they haven't gone to Bournemouth and won. Big game against Leeds this weekend. Both obviously, well, not this weekend, the following weekend.
Yeah, next game.
Both in trouble. Then they've got a tougher run of fixtures themselves. But we sort of said before Leicester, they might get 7 points out of these three. And if they do so, they've got buffer.
They're 3 points ahead of us and 4 points above the relegation zone now. Yeah, so we'll see how they progress. You can blink and get sucked straight back in very quickly.
Absolutely.
With wins and draws being so scarce at the bottom. Leicester 2, Brighton 2. James, if I'd have said to you before the weekend, Brighton are going to have more than 60% of possession. They're going to complete nearly twice as many accurate passes as Leicester are going to dominate the ball. They're going to create 3 big chances and they're going to miss them all.
None of that would have surprised me.
Exactly that, right? And this is me looking at the game on paper. I saw the highlights and the goals, and they could have scored more. Leicester did have the odd couple of chances as well, but it felt like, I think Brighton will be coming away feeling like they should have probably won the game. And obviously, De Zerbi was a little upset about Danny Welbeck.
I love him, you know I do. I love him.
Going down on the penalty, going down quite... No, you know what? He got kicked. It was... I would have called it soft. Is it one of those where there's contact, therefore he's entitled to go down and therefore there should be a penalty? Because
I think it's a penalty, but I think we're probably currently working within a higher bar at the moment, which Southampton fans will be screaming, well, what about us and our disallowed goal? And I actually probably agree that that's certainly the accident, and I think it was accidental trod on Jacob Ramsey was probably enough to say once they've forensically analysed it, it's going to get ruled out. Whereas the Welbeck one actually, in terms of contact, wasn't quite so obvious, and it's partly because Welbeck's, I think it was it Thomas challenged him?
Yes, I think so.
They both, the feet come towards each other rather than Thomas just swiping towards Welbeck. But Thomas obviously kicks the underside of Welbeck's boot. Yeah, it should have been a penalty. You know I love De Zerbi. Brighton will certainly feel like they should have won, but also probably very happy with the draw, considering Evan Ferguson's brilliant headed goal.
That was a great
so late
header.
In the game. I feel like obviously so many people were going for Mitoma and March last week who were making transfers, and it's obviously completely understandable. I saw captaincies out there for both Mitoma and March. And you know what? All praise to these people who took the chance. Good luck to you. But it's almost summed up, and you can spin the narrative. Mitoma is a perfect example. You can spin the narrative either way. So with Mitoma, he's obviously scored a worldie goal. Absolute worldie where he cuts inside, bends it far top corner, brilliant goal. And he's obviously on a brilliant run. And you can say, oh yeah, well, Mitoma was low XG. Of course, that shot does have a low XG. But then he's also put the chance for Solly March on the plate, which is obviously higher XA. And March ends up somehow taking the shot in the same way Mitrovic missed the penalty at Newcastle. He ends up kicking it onto slipping and hitting it onto his own foot, and it balloons over. And there'll be people who've gone both, just steamed into him. What a big moment that would have been for you as a differential to get the Mitoma assist for Solly March. So it was near misses for both. I think probably from what we learned at the weekend, considering everything was going in for March and he's now missed that big chance. I think if you were going in this week, and it is Bournemouth at home next, so if it works right for you, then it's perfectly understandable. I think now people will go Mitoma over March.
Yeah, I've got my eyes on Almiron to Mitoma. Newcastle are coming in. I know their next game is West Ham at home. After that, they do have a couple more tricky fixtures, and they might have a blank as well. Saying if Newcastle are in the Carabao Cup final, I could see myself losing Almiron and getting.
You have to remember that is Newcastle obviously scheduled to play Brighton that week. So you lose Mitoma as well.
Right.
But I think if you look at the fixtures either side, I could certainly understand why an Almiron to a Mitoma move would be particularly interesting. I'm not. If the double game week in 22 happens, I'm not going to move Rodrigo to Mitoma this week, am I? It's not. What am I going to do? Move Martinelli to him? Arsenal got Everton. I'm more likely to move Martinelli to another Arsenal player if I wanted to move him on, for example. Am I going to move Rashford on with a double? No. So it doesn't really work for me. I could, sure. I could upgrade from Andreas Pereira potentially. But then with a front three of Mitrovic, Haaland and Kane, and I've got De Bruyne, who I'd still be benching it, possibly. I mean, I wouldn't against Bournemouth, but I'd be benching a big player. I'd probably be benching Mitrovic away to Chelsea, for example, if that's what I decided to do. And I don't know if I'd want to do that when he's clear talisman for Fulham, for example. But I think, Mitoma, Sam Murray said on COTC last week that the model numbers were suggesting that Mitoma over March was the right call. I think probably on eye test, he's probably ahead of it now as well. So Mitoma over March. If you've gone March, by the way, don't shit yourself and move. That just wouldn't make sense. Just crack on. It's worth noting Alexis McAllister is suspended for that Bournemouth game. Fifth yellow card at the weekend. That was obviously Brighton's 19th game. And Adam Lallana picked up an injury as well. So it's not clear at this stage who would play in that position against Bournemouth. If Lallana's injury is longer term, we may see McAllister move further forward. But it's probably more likely, I think, that Pascal Gross would move from right back where he's been playing into a midfield area, and Joel Veltman will come back in at right back. There's a couple more enablers, obviously, to speak about. Evan Ferguson, I know a lot of the Brighton guys were really surprised that he didn't start. He's now up to 4.6, and it's an absolutely brilliant headed goal. And I know a lot of the Brighton fans want him to play, and a lot think that he will now come back in for that Bournemouth fixture. As ever, he's 18 years of age. And in Welbeck, you have a player that's certainly a threat to his X minutes, without a doubt, one way or the other. How often are they going to play together? Probably only when they're chasing the game late, I'd suggest. He's probably where you're at. And also, there was a 4.0 starter for Brighton as well. Jan Paul van Heck played right-sided centre-back. For me, he was very sloppy on Harvey Barnes' goal. But it was a surprise to see him named and make his Premier League debut ahead of Adam Webster. I'd be very careful about that. We always get excited, don't we? You've got a 4.0 starter for a good team. That becomes instantly interesting. I'd be careful of that. Colwill, we do think, might even be out till as long as April, possibly. But there's every chance Webster comes back in. And those who got Purvis Estupiñán will be absolutely delighted with the 2 assists, considering how well finished they were by Mitoma and Ferguson, respectively. But if you did want to go on a Brighton defender, I think it's him at the moment. It's Estupiñán.
There might be another 4.0 defender who's starting that might get a mention in a minute that I'd take over.
But Leicester,
he did have the chance in the first half as well, didn't he, Van Heck? The headed opportunity from a corner. I don't know if he's going to be a threat at set pieces or not, but I wouldn't go there, to be honest.
I would imagine, and I'm sure the Brighton fans will correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine the advice would be, like, if you want to go there because he's going to be your third sub, then, like, fine. But if you wanted him because you're fitting for cover or starts at the moment, then nah. Even he's one, even if you took him as an example. And if you're buying enablers, say people are like, I'm going to be downgrading from Cancelo. Yes, I still have him. It's worth considering the potential for 25, 28, because let's say even Brighton do play. If you go for someone like Van Heck, let's say Brighton and Newcastle's on in 25, that's a sort of week where, let's just say you've got 3 United players, you'll need him as cover to play. Do you want him to play away to Newcastle? And then in game week 28, they're scheduled to play Manchester City. Even if those games happened, is that what you want from your enabling defender? You'd probably still be better off with Bueno, whose fixtures respectively would be Fulham and Leeds. Does that make sense? So I think that's worth considering if you're looking at enabling players. Leicester obviously have James Maddison back, which is really important. Obviously came on and played the last 20 minutes or so. Clearly they're not in a great spot at the moment. It does sound like they're going to do a little bit of business this week. I know they got a new left back in. And there are rumours that actually that Rodgers will be backed a little bit this month, which obviously wasn't the case in the summer. I don't know if there's an FFP lean that they feel like they've gone past from last summer. Okay. It's possible. But it sounds like they will get a few players in. They've got difficult fixtures. You're not buying their assets at the moment currently.
No. Southampton 0, Aston Villa 1. After a great week, Southampton back down to earth with a bit of a bump and now facing the reality. I think it's just so tight at the bottom that they won't be looking at it panicking, because one win and they'll be out of it. But disappointing to lose out at home to Aston Villa, no doubt, for them.
Yeah, obviously hinged on the big moment of this goal. I mean, it's worth saying Saints produced a low XG number during the game. And it does sound like, for all the unhappiness with the disallowed goal, which I certainly understand, they didn't actually play very well. And Villa, as we've suggested, will have games where they're very, very tough to play against. I don't think this was a vintage performance from Villa either. They've ended up scoring a goal from a set piece, which I think is definitely a little bit of an Achilles heel for Southampton at the moment. Well finished for Ollie Watkins. And obviously, interestingly for Watkins, Danny Ings has obviously been sold. And the quotes from Unai Emery last week suggested that if they couldn't get who they wanted in this window, they would wait till the summer before they got another forward in. Now, if something happens to Watkins, that's going to put them in a situation where they're very light. It also could mean, if that happened, that Leon Bailey would play as the kind of a nominal number 9 every week. And obviously, he's still a very interesting and viable asset at his price. Watkins, somewhere down the line, might be worth keeping an eye on. I can imagine this now that we get to game week 25. And Villa will be off the back of playing against City and Arsenal. So they got Leicester next, then they got City and Arsenal. So, I mean, you don't really want to go in new now. But once we get to 25, I reckon in that week, they'll be quite popular, Villa. So we've got Everton away, Palace at home, West Ham away, and Bournemouth at home. And we know those Everton and Bournemouth fixtures in 25 and 28 will go ahead. So I think Villa assets, honestly, I'm almost certain of it. It will be once we get to 25, people will want something. And I think Watkins' assuredness of minutes might be quite interesting at that point. Let's say we know that Fulham and Brentford, respectively, and your likes of Mitrovic and Tony are going to blank somewhere and there's no doubles, for example. Then I think people might begin to lean into someone like Watkins. I mean, Buendia is worth keeping an eye on. Leon Bailey is obviously interesting at his price as an enabler. And I still think Tyrone Mings at 4.3 is the one I'd be very comfortable with. Yeah. I did have a very strong message from a Villa fan last week who told me, in reference to Luca Dean's potential injury, for which we've got no time frame on at the moment, that Alex Moreno will play at left back no matter what. That's literally how, when a message is sent, you can tell how strong it is. Yeah, it was quite aggressive. This guy was like, yeah, Moreno's definitely going to play no matter what going forward. Quite how that's known or determined based on what I thought was a dodgy performance against Leeds last week, I have no idea. And apparently he had dodgy moments at Southampton as well. So I wouldn't want to tread that path currently. And a few of our Villa patrons have said, no, that's not clear at the moment. It's not to say that it won't be Moreno becomes first choice, but it's not clear at the moment. Young and Cash would be worth avoiding at the moment. Young's playing well, but he's old. So that could obviously change. And there's no guarantee that Cash is going to bring money for you either. So I think Mings over Konsa. If Carlos comes back fit, I think at the moment Carlos would come in for Konsa rather than Mings. That's my take. So Tyrone Mings could easily be my enabler for Cancelo this week to move something else in my team. Where I take the view and say, well, I'm going to bench him next few weeks, and then he's sitting there and he's ready for that 25 to 28 period, possibly.
Let's talk about West Ham 2, Everton 0. James, thank you for predicting the 3-0 to West Ham. And if it had finished 3-0, I don't think there would have been any particular complaints from Everton. They did have the odd chance to score, but nothing of real quality that you would think that they should have scored from. But yeah, ended up being a change for West Ham to a back three with Soufal and Emerson on the wing backs, Bonner in the middle, Aged on the left. He's a very, very good player, Aged. I think we saw it in the World Cup and we've finally seen it in the Premier League as well. And Zuma on the right. Is there any surprise, James, that West Ham get their three best centre-backs on the pitch and it's a clean sheet all of a sudden?
Is that the best three? So Bonner over Kehrer?
Yeah, as a straight in the middle defensive, like in the middle of a three, I'd have Bonner over Kehrer. Well, defensively, Bonner is way better than Kehrer. One-on-one challenges. On the ball, Kehrer is better than Bonner. But if you just want them to defend, Bonner is a better defender, in my opinion.
Okay, so basically more suited to David Moyes' team is what you're telling me.
Do you remember Bonner's had a lot of time out with injury in the last couple of years and is also now the other side of 32. So I haven't seen him with a consistent run in the team. He had a good game at the weekend. Other than that, I wouldn't go. But Paqueta dropped into one of a two holding midfield alongside Declan Rice, and they played very much as a two and actually quite narrow as well. Quite often when we play four at the back, the two pivots will be quite a bit wider apart. They were very narrow in the middle of the pitch. With Benrahma, Bowen, and Mikel Antonio did start up top. It wasn't a good performance from either side. They both, like you talking about Liverpool, Chelsea, losing the ball a little bit too much, a bit of sloppiness. They're just too. If Liverpool Chelsea was a game of two teams in the middle of the table, this was a game of two teams at the bottom of the table. For sure. But Everton really lacking in quality, mate. Really lacking in quality in the final third. Damari Gray and Iwobi are the type of players that have moments rather than consistently play well throughout a game. Dominic Calvert-Lewin had no service whatsoever and was completely out of it. And Tarkowski makes a few mistakes, and West Ham have got in and nicked a couple of goals and could have scored more. Emerson hits the bar. Benrahma got Pickford into a great save in the first half. Declan Rice nudges it just wide. Could have scored more. And Everton will feel like, they're fucked, basically.
Just on Kehrer, I've seen him play 7-8 times for you. And I've seen him play 4 or 5 different positions. I still don't know what his best position is.
He's left. He's two-footed, but he's predominantly left. I think. I'm not sure either. James is probably the point.
I told you. I think he got hung out to dry. I really do.
I'm not. Here's the thing. He's not a bad football player. Like I've said before, he's good on the ball and he's calm and what have you. He makes mistakes. You know the difference between this game and most of our other games in recent times. Defensively, we didn't make a fatal mistake. And we've been making fatal mistakes that lead to goals regularly.
Is that because
this was the first time in ages that we didn't?
Is that because they're bang average going forward, though? Or because you were good defensively?
Zuma's a good defender. He had a good game.
Well, we knew he'd make a difference for you.
Is a good defender, and Bonner is a good defender. They just didn't make a mistake. And don't get me wrong, having very impotent opposition in Everton helps. They didn't force us into any particular errors. They didn't have much pace. Very strange from Frank Lampard in terms
as if it wasn't bad enough for Everton fans. What you just called them.
And it felt very weird. We both matched up with 3 at the back, right? They had Mina, Tarkowski, and Cody, but then Mikalenko and Seamus Coleman, you'd say, are wing back, fullback, like traditional wing back fullbacks. He took both of them off at half time and brought on Tom Davis and Dwight McNeil, and I didn't know whether he was trying to switch to 4 at the back.
But they had to go for it, didn't they?
And Iwobi suddenly becomes a right back. I'm like, okay, Iwobi, if you want Iwobi to be your right back in a back 4, alongside Cody Tarkowski and Yerry Mina, I'll play that all day long, James.
Yeah, no, they've gone like McNeil and Iwobi as more like wingers, haven't they? And obviously gone for it. And obviously you sit off. I mean, it's striking to say that I don't know what it says for West Ham that Everton have had 68% of the ball against you.
I'd be interested what that is in the second half versus first half, James. Let's have a look. Second half, 75%.
I mean,
76%. But that's just do what you want to do and not break
No, I
us
get
down
that.
at all,
You've got the 2-0 lead and you want to expose them on a counter-attack with the likes of
and we
Bowen,
really did in the
Benrahma
second
and
half
Antonio.
as well.
Yeah, no questions on that. I mean, despite that, you still had nearly 3 times the XG of them in the second half. I accept that it's a tactical ploy. God, how bad were they? I don't see them getting out of this now.
Well, you've got Tarkowski made a few mistakes, right? And when your key defenders are making mistakes like that, it's very difficult. I didn't see where the goals were going to come from. I just don't see where the goals are going to come from.
They've
Gay
got
and Onana in midfield are just not quite.
Danjuma's coming in on loan, and he's a good player.
Yeah.
And you would hope that certainly that helps for them. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Arsenal and Liverpool next. You only worry that this is going to look worse. Then, as we said last week, there's a few fixtures where they'll think they can get something. But yeah, right pressure on those back-to-back home games against Leeds and Villa in 24-25. I mean, if those games were happening this weekend, if you said to me, right, Leeds going to Everton this week, and I go, Leeds will win. If Villa were going there this week, and I go, right, Villa will win. But that's unfortunate. That's how I feel about Everton at the moment. Yeah. Yourselves, Suj, it just feels like you fixed the problems that a lot of the fans have been calling for, right? Drop Cresswell, drop Souček, change the system, get Benrahma in the team.
Yep.
And you won.
And obviously fit centre-backs in Aged and Zuma and Co being in there. Yeah, I mean, look, it wasn't vintage by any stretch of the imagination, but I think Emerson will stay in the team. So if someone's looking for a 4 million left
I've been down this road, Suj.
I know you have. And he didn't get into the team, but I do think he will stick. Jared Bowen had his best game for West Ham in forever. Obviously announced twins the day before. Did you know that?
Well, at least look,
he's not firing blanks anymore, James.
No, but maybe when you think about it logically, maybe if she's been pregnant, maybe they weren't. Maybe they eased off for a few months or something.
He was getting him. It still wasn't great, but he was getting involved in the game a lot more. And when he picked up the ball, he was a lot more direct. And you just need sometimes something like this just snaps you out of it. And Antonio had his best game for a while as well. Amazing what the pressure of a new Danny Ings coming is. Oh shit! I better pull my socks up. Again, not vintage, but better is all I would describe it as. Danny Ings got the last 20 minutes, and he's just streets ahead of Antonio in terms of quality on the ball and mobility as well. Antonio sometimes a bit like I had my mate who I was at the game. Antonio's a diesel truck, whereas Danny Ings can get about the pitch a lot easier. I could see Ings being first choice though ahead of Antonio by the time the next.
To be fair, Antonio's had a big impact on that game. It was really good assist for the second goal.
His best performance in a while. Still, just not vintage. But yeah. It was much better. Seeing the players, they connected with the fans, they knew what it meant, and it was good. And to be fair, like with Everton, sack the board was fairly audible throughout. We didn't actually. It wasn't until 82nd minute that you're getting sacked in the morning started getting chanted. But I think that's primarily because if we'd sung it earlier,
you're shitting yourself.
You don't know which manager. Both the managers are like, you singing about him or me?
Oh, maybe
either one of us. But that stuff didn't come out to the last 10 minutes. But sack the board was very evident from Everton's point of view.
Did you see Bashiri and Kenwright? Obviously, were at the game.
The whole board was, I think. All the Gameweeks came out.
It was the first game Bashiri had been to for a really long time.
2 years
apparently.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see him in the car park after the game?
No.
They were both interviewed by, is it Glenn Cottrell? I forget the guy's name from Sky. Obviously, as they're trying to get in the car, he's throwing a microphone in their face. Kenwright gives it the kind of blub story, like it's so terrible, what's happening. And he's asked about Lampard. He's like, I can't say nothing. And it's all a bit of a mess. And then Mashiri gets the same treatment afterwards. and he's asked, like, is it time for Frank Lampard to go? And Mashiri says it's not my decision.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that think that actually it's a dig again at the Everton fans, in terms of saying, well, you have to tell us that you want us to sack him, because he made this comment last week about all the sackings have been due to Everton fans wanting change and stuff, and he wants to do best by them and all that. And oh my God, it's bad. Then there was this stuff last week where they obviously didn't go to the Southampton game, and the police reported that obviously there were no reports of serious concerns or anything like that for them going into the game. There's this lady who was on the board who Everton had posted themselves saying that she'd been put on a headlock, but then Merseyside police said that no reports of any wrongdoing had been reported to them, so there was nothing they could act upon. Yeah, I mean, it's properly
grim.
bad. Yeah, it's grim. Yeah. I really feel for the Evertonians, listen, and I really hope for them that they get out of this, and I hope that in the next few years they get their football club back. But I think this is probably going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. Yeah. Emerson, you bastard. Because he is again, if you play in 25, Forest at home is a good fixture.
Yeah. 4 million is a good price. If Danny Ings cements himself as first choice, I think we will start to create more chances as well. There's a few in and around, but I think, look, you're looking at the next few fixtures. We've got Newcastle away, and we'll talk about them in a second. They're never going to concede a goal until, I think,
if
2024.
If Bowen goes to St James's and scores, they're definitely making love again, and you should probably buy him quite quickly.
And after that, we've got Chelsea at home. Then we come to your place, which is a difficult game. There's some tough fixtures ahead in the next 3. I just wouldn't be steaming in. But if it's a cheap enabler like Emerson, sure. As far as Everton go, nothing.
I'll give you an example.
Literally nothing.
I'll give you an example, right? So if I wanted to go, the 3 best Arsenal at the moment, in my opinion, would be certainly Saka and Odegaard, and then your defensive pick if you bought Saliba earlier, or I've got a bit of value in White, whatever, right? That's probably the 3. So I could manipulate it with the 2 free transfers right now, thinking about their double in 23, to move in 23, go to Rodrigo to Saka and Martinelli to Odegaard, right? Now, to do that, I need to obviously make the Cancelo transfer this week, and it only gives me 4.6 to play with. But if I consider that between now and wanting to make those transfers in 23, people are going to be buying Saka and Odegaard. They've got Everton this come in 22 as well. Then I haven't got 4.6, have I? I've got 4.3, maybe even only 4.2. And once you start looking below 4.2, if Emerson's going to play regularly, he's kind of the standout because of that potential fixture in 25 if obviously United beat Forest in the Cup. But I'd need him to play. And I don't think I could have any confidence in that right now.
You could have more confidence than you did pre-World Cup, is all I would say.
What,
because
on one game?
He was okay. He was
He's had
better.
all these games where he hasn't played, Suj.
Yeah, but it happens in a heartbeat.
But it might be
changes. The system has changed.
No, I get that.
Right?
It might be that he looks at it now and he goes, right, Everton at home, and maybe even Forest at home in 25, goes, I can play a more offensive player like that. He might look at Newcastle, Chelsea, and Tottenham and go, I can't play him against them. I don't know. Is he on loan from Chelsea? He is, isn't it?
No, we bought him.
Oh, it's permanent, yeah? So he could play in 23.
Yeah,
Not that you'd want to start him, I don't think, but okay.
Crystal Palace 0, Newcastle 0. Like James, these guys, 11 goals conceded all season.
It's brilliant.
Fantastic. I'm annoyed that they're on away at St James's as our next game, because they are going to be stingy as hell defensively. And again, another good defensive performance from Newcastle. They'll feel disappointed, right, that they could have come away and won this game with the amount of chances that they created and shots that they had. 2 big chances created and 2 missed for Newcastle. Nothing for Crystal Palace. But I think this is the difference between them being a shoo-in for top 4 and the risk of slipping out. Like sometimes these draws creeping in when you'd expect them to maybe get over the line. And it's difficult at the top to be consistent like that. What was the other draw the other week? where they should have won.
No, true. I'm to Leeds.
Leeds.
And obviously
Yeah.
they only beat Fulham very late as well.
Yeah, 1-0. And you're like, you come on, you need to get over the line in some of these, because we've seen with the teams in the round, relentless.
Do you know what? I had a lot of people Saturday night calling Newcastle boring. And I have to say, I really, really strongly disagree with that statement. There was only one team who were trying to play on the front foot in that game on Saturday. And yes, we probably are at a stage where we expect Newcastle to have a lot more of the ball than Palace. But I saw them trying. Admittedly, the problem was it only really felt like they were going to score from a Kieran Trippier cross, be it from open play, from a set piece, whatever. Oh, why is he always in a bonus? Yeah, this is a big reason why, by the way. But defensively, absolutely so solid. The back four plays really narrow without the ball. They're not going to let people play in behind them between the lines. If people want to be good enough and they can get the ball on the outside and you're going to beat Botman and Schär in the air, good luck. And Nick Pope coming to claim as well, right? So they're difficult to play against. They're difficult to score against. But I think the narrative of they're boring has come about because in Newcastle's last 4 Premier League games, there's only been 1 goal scored. They've had 3 0-0s and obviously Isak's goal against Fulham. So suddenly people are going, they're 1-0, 0-0 merchants. They're boring and stuff. I don't think that's the case. I think what Newcastle are probably finding at the moment is the adaptation from being what they've been for the last 10 years or so, which is we don't want the ball. So now teams are playing them and giving them maximum respect and saying, what have you got? And Longstaff, Willock, Joel Linton, and to a lesser degree, Almiron, because he's got a little bit more in terms of can come inside and shoot. They've all been extremely good for them, but they're a little bit short of quality in terms of creativity. And I think that's not a slight on them, because I don't think, in all honesty, Newcastle would have expected to be in this position this soon, where people would now be treating them in this way and saying, well, we're going to put up 2 banks of 4 against you. What have you got? So I think a creative player, like would they, if they suddenly went and bought a Maddison or something and just take the burden off Guimaraes a little bit, would massively help. It might be we see Wilson and Isak together at certain stages. That may help. But actually, ironically, and it's only because they've done so well, we're now looking at them a little bit differently. I'm not sure that we should. Defensively, outstanding. And obviously, they'd had one moment in the second half where they did get breached, and Pope's save from Mateta is absolutely brilliant. So I thought some of the criticism of Newcastle at the weekend was, I wouldn't say out of order, but I felt, I really did actually, because they were the one that were trying to play through Palace. They were the team that had 61% of the ball and had 16 shots to Palace's 6. That Mateta shot was Palace's only shot on target. And drawing there's not a disaster. I mean, Man United went there and drew last Wednesday. You know that Palace can be a difficult game. And you know what I'd said about like when Tottenham went there and won 4-0, you get that second goal and you're done. That momentum building for Palace didn't really come at the weekend. It was still more about could Newcastle break them down or not. And actually, as I said, I think it was all from kind of crosses that it felt like their best moments would come. Botman and Schär are both probably going to be in the goals at some point in the near future. They get on a lot in terms of the set pieces. Botman goals probably imminent, actually, but Fabian Schär still looks even more likely to add returns. So it's still every reason to have double Newcastle defensive. I know there'll be some people got treble, but to go back to your earlier point, because of some of these draws, yeah, of course, like at the moment, do I think Newcastle finish above Tottenham? Yeah, absolutely. But if we win tonight and I'm looking at them going, it's 3 points, like, can we catch them over 18, 19 games? Well, yeah, if they're going to have this problem where actually teams sit up against them and say, what have you got? And then counter on Newcastle, then yeah, the results may dip a little bit.
They've only lost one game all season.
I know, it's incredible.
Same as Arsenal. If I said to you, they've lost the same number of games as Arsenal. They've just drawn a shitload more.
But you've drawn 7 more. And if you look at the goals scored, they're obviously 12 behind Arsenal in terms of goals scored, 20 behind Man City. And again, do you know what? It's not even a slight on Newcastle.
20 behind Haaland. Get Man City.
Okay, we put it that way. They've scored, what's Haaland on now? 25?
25.
They've scored 8 more than Haaland. I mean, admittedly, Haaland's scored more than, I think everybody in the bottom half, bar Leicester and Leeds, I think, is a madness in itself. I saw someone post yesterday and say he could do Dixie Dean's record, and they showed a comparison that he was only like 6 or 7 behind Dixie Dean at like the same stage. For those who don't know Dixie Dean scored 60 league goals in a season. But even that, the fact we're looking here at Newcastle and comparing them to the top 2, it's credit to them. So massive. I think those are saying they're boring and stuff like that. Okay, they might be missing a little bit of a technical quality and stuff, but I think that's harsh actually. And going there in 22, what's your expectation?
If we come out with a low scoring affair,
you take a draw now, mate. You'd run away with it, mate.
All day long. Low scoring affair. If we're going to win, it will be like 1-0 or something scrappy. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it at all.
And to flip it the other way, if you compare their home form with, say, Tottenham's as an example, massive difference.
Let's move on to Sunday, James. We've got Leeds United, Brentford. I predicted this is a lovely Desmond Tutu, so they did what they should and served up a 0-0.
Oh, just quick, obviously, Zaha.
I did think, gone.
Zaha, obviously, picked up a hamstring injury, so that's obviously a potential problem for them going forward for Palace. For Leeds and Brentford, yeah, I mean, this was one of them where something happens normally early in the game and you go, this is going to be a cracker. I mean, Tony had a shot after 5 seconds and he's like, oh, great. And to be honest, I watched the rest of the game and unfortunately I was around my parents' house, so I wasn't 100% concentrated on it. But I got to the end of the game and I was like, I'm not sure what I've just watched. Like, it was all right. It was like very competitive. The tempo was good and stuff. I was like, what am I going to talk about on the pod? And I was like, I can't actually think of a lot other than just drilling into some individual assets. Rico Henry is a player that I really like. I've spoken about that a number of times. Those who've gone Tony and a few captained him this weekend as well will obviously be very disappointed with the 1 point return. They've got Southampton next. Palace is their next home game in 24. They've got Arsenal in between afterwards. But I think with Brentford, you're probably in position at this minute that if you've got Tony, great. If you haven't, you're probably not looking to add, bearing in mind there's probably Arsenal afterwards, but you're certainly holding. Yep. Do you know, Suj, who is the highest scoring defender in FPL outside of Arsenal and Newcastle players?
Outside of Arsenal, Newcastle. I feel like this aimed at this, so I'm going to say Luke Ayling.
As if you went for the Leeds player.
Okay, I don't know. No, it's not going to be Ethan Pinnock, is it?
It's Ben Mee, mate.
Okay.
Who FPL Harry still has this warped thing that he thinks he is Ben Mee. But yeah, Ben Mee is the highest scoring defender in FPL outside of Arsenal Newcastle players. He's 4.7. Now, of course, they also fall into the line of teams that may well blank in 25, but then you probably wouldn't have wanted to start him at Manchester United anyway. I'd still prefer to go to Rico Henry, actually. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, that was probably one that was really under the radar. Yeah, Mee has more than any Manchester United defender. Certainly any Tottenham, any Chelsea, any Liverpool. He's behind Trippier, Schär, Saliba, Burn, Gabriel, Botman and White, which certainly gives you an indication of the Arsenal-Newcastle domination of the FPL defensive numbers. 79 points is not bad at just over halfway for what was a 4.5 defender pre-season. It's pretty good. But it's Leeds assets that I think will obviously be potentially of interest to people should the double happen. Now, if it doesn't, again, you probably just continue to overlook it. And for people like me who have got Rodrigo, certainly happy to give it a go. I'm not sure I'll be diving in though. Just a reminder, it's Nottingham Forest away, who haven't lost at home since September, and then Manchester United away, if it happens. And then off the back of that, Leeds play United again. What is interesting, of course, though, is that after that, they go to Everton, which we've already mentioned. And then as long as Newcastle do the business against Southampton, the Carabao Cup, Southampton at home was pretty good coverage for game week 25. And I mentioned about people looking maybe for defensive enablers. Oh, James, you're not going to recommend a Leeds defender. No, I'm not. But Max Wober, who's obviously just come into the team, is a powerful unit. They've just bought him. They needed a defensive reinforcement. He's 4.5. He's in. I imagine he'll stay in. And very interestingly, he took a direct free kick yesterday. So you might see him in involvement from set pieces from the edge of the box. I think you'll find he's probably going to be a powerful potential asset from actual corners and deliveries into the box as well. If you had to go and buy one for whatever reason, that'd be the one I'd chance. I could only think it'd be of interest to people if they already had 3 Man United players on board and the luxury of 2 free transfers and went, okay, I can take a chance of it and it covers me nice for 25. I think Wobber's the one that I'd probably go for. Would you go from Kepa to Meslier? I don't think you do at this stage, do you?
No.
Rodrigo's expected minutes are certainly under threat. And I think at this stage, there's so many other in and around his value, the Odegaards, etc., that I probably wouldn't be asked to dive in, because I think once you come off the double and then look at versus Manchester United again, you're going to look at people like Odegaard, Martinelli, getting up to Mahrez is like less than 1 million more, for example, and thinking, I want to move it straight on. So with the 2 away games, I probably wouldn't bother. And there's obviously threats to his place now with Brentford, who came on for him towards the end of the game yesterday. And obviously Jorginho Ruto, we didn't see anything of yesterday, but he's certainly a talented player. It's probably Nonto as the enabler, maybe. He'll certainly have a battle with Serge Aurier in that first game in game week 22, I should imagine. Nonto's is 5 million. Sinistera's obviously just come back from injury as well. Got on the pitch yesterday. That muddies it a little bit more. Not that I think that will impact Nonto, because I think he's playing well enough at the minute. But yeah, I think it's perfectly viable just to bypass the Leeds double rather than think. I think for like Arsenal City in 23, you feel like you want 5 or 6. Yeah. This doesn't feel like that if the double obviously happens. Just on that, if Leeds draw, Leeds are playing 12:30 on Saturday against Accrington or Bournemouth. They play each other tomorrow night in the FA Cup. If that game, well, hopefully, weather dependent.
It's so cold, mate. Frosty pitches and all that.
It is cold. What I would say is, should that game be postponed, even Leeds game at the weekend, I guess in theory that could impact 22, but I imagine they'd literally just move it into the midweek, like literally next midweek. I think that's possible. And what I was going to say is, I think that even if the game does go ahead, let's say Leeds play Accrington, even if it's a draw, don't necessarily assume straight away that United and Leeds in 22 is going to be off. Because I think there is a possibility, as I've mentioned previously, that if United win, for example, and Leeds draw, that the game in 22 might still happen. And it's a little bit complicated because I think it may also be dependent on how many other games go to a replay. The example of that would be, let's say City and Arsenal also goes to a replay and the BBC go, yeah, definitely want to show that. Whereas, say, if Leeds and Accrington's the only game that goes to a replay, BBC or ITV are going to go, we'll show that then. And therefore, I think it still goes ahead in that week. It's a little bit complicated. But yeah, I wouldn't just assume straight away that's it, it's off if Leeds draw. Obviously, if Manchester United draw, then yeah, it definitely is. And the reason is because Leeds could, in theory, play their FA Cup replay in the midweek of 23. United can't because they've got the Europa League game against Barcelona that midweek.
Okay. Let's talk about Man City 3, Wolves 0, or Erling Haaland 3, Wolves 0. Again, I think one of the interesting things was the lineup. With Laporte coming back in, Kyle Walker, would you now go as far as to say you think Kyle Walker's second choice to Rico Lewis because he keeps starting, and Kevin De Bruyne coming back into the team as well and laying on the first goal?
I think at the moment we'd have to say yes, and that's purely because of the role that Lewis is playing, which was actually almost entirely for the first half yesterday, almost entirely just in central midfield
alongside Rodri.
Yeah, so I think if he wants to play that way, you'd have to say yes. Now, the flip of that is they changed it at half time and they went to more of a conventional back four. And so they changed it up. I wonder if this whole strategy is potentially designed as something for Arsenal. Like he's thinking about it that deep and trying to get the team ready in this kind of almost 3-2-4-1 shape, ready for Arsenal. And thinking about how he can manipulate that particular fixture. And by doing things by like, right, well, that's going to force you to move Xhaka really deep in the game, for example. So I think at the moment I would say yes on Lewis, but I'm very conscious about the idea of buying him. He's 3.9. And at the moment, was going to say I can't give you a reason not to. The big
Yeah,
reason
but
the big reason
they've got
not
a
to is
double,
you block yourself.
and you want 3 other Man City. Like, I want 3 better Man City. De Bruyne and Haaland are there, so I think I'd more likely just go with Stone. I feel like Stones is going to be more nailed on than the others, but it is very, very difficult. But comfortable win in the end. I think Lopetegui was pretty annoyed at half time in terms of what he saw from his front 3 and ripped them all off at half time and completely changed it, understandably. But then they go and score 2 more goals, and it's very difficult at Manchester City. And it's very difficult when the team has a cyborg that looks like Erling Haaland.
Look, there's no issue here for Wolves, and I think they certainly would have looked at anything that could have been got from this game, despite City's problems, was obviously a real bonus. You are right, Suj, to say, yeah, tore it up a little bit at half-time. It's encouraging that people like Pablo Sarabia obviously got minutes into him and stuff like that. Mario Lemina played in midfield. These are positives. They've obviously bought Craig Dawson from your place as well, Suj.
Yep.
Which those who may have Totti Gomez as a third defender should possibly be aware of. Bueno continues to play at the moment. I still think he's probably the enabling one to go to. Admittedly, it's Liverpool next. But they're a bit shot shy at the moment. That's obviously consecutive league games. That's mad, isn't it? The Liverpool gone consecutive league games without scoring is a little bit crazy. With Haaland, it's interesting that a lot of the talk, and I think understandably so, by the way, was that against Tottenham, he didn't look quite right. And I agree with that. And I watched a lot of this game last night back. And by the way, it still doesn't look quite right. And I think there's probably a lesson there in that it doesn't particularly matter. His returns in home games. This is one of the things I get every week on, say, the deadline stream. So I want to take him on. Okay, fine. Take him on. Haaland's returns in home games this season: 5, 17, 17, 23, 6, 13, 5 as a substitute, 1, 6, 6, 17. 1 blank in there against Brentford. And so I think like City home games, you've got to ask yourself, and I understand people behind and want to take him on. Is it right? If Man City got a home game, is it right to take him on?
And when it's against Wolves.
Whereas you look at next week
half of the table.
and be very careful. Exactly that, yeah, as well. When you look at him going to Tottenham away next week, and listen, we're not brilliant defensively, as you will have seen against them last week, and our home form's not great at the moment as well. But when you look at Haaland going to Tottenham, and Rashford or Bruno Fernandes have the double if it happens, then Rashford's going to be so highly captained. This will be the week where a lot of people go against Haaland. And what I would add to that is, I'd say that even if the United double doesn't happen, it's still viable to take him on, because United's still sitting there with Crystal Palace at home. So I think it's a little bit about your timing. It may even open up where people go, well, Arsenal got Everton away then. Can I take him on? Haaland's returns in away games since the 13-pointer against West Ham at the start of the season: 6, 9, 6, 2, 0, 13, 2, 2. So there's still big returns in there,
50,
like the
50,
Leeds and the West Ham.
But it's 50-50.
But it's not so much, is it?
You know what's back, James? The old X-touch. Cheeky little X-touch. 16 touches of the ball in the whole game. 4 of them were shots on target. And of those shots on target, 3 of them were goals. The efficiency of the guy. You say he's not right, but it just goes to show how
doesn't
need to be.
If he's
16 touches of the ball to score 3 goals and 4 shots on target. He doesn't need to be. They just need to play him in.
If you've got delivery, exactly that. If you've got delivery from De Bruyne, as good as the first goal, fine. Penalty, fine, obviously. And even the third goal, how many times in the past has Riyad Mahrez shoot there? He's looked at Cyborg next to him and gone, "I better pass him. He's gonna kill me if I don't." And it's on a plate for him. So he's got the 3 goals, and he's probably got
subbed at 61 minutes as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, those who did go against are probably relieved that it's literally just been that, for example. So I think look, it's pick your battles going ahead. That's all. So even if you look at 23, you can look at the form of Saka and Odegaard, for example. I just look at City home to Villa as the first fixture there and go, well, if I think Haaland's playing, that in the double, he's getting it. But even then with the away games, Forest and Bournemouth, okay, maybe there's a conversation to be had when it comes around. 26 might be one where he's got Newcastle at home. And even though it's a home game, obviously they're outstanding defensively. And say if Salah does have a double there, and I realise right now people going, we ain't going Salah now. Listen, if Liverpool the only team with a double in 26 is them on Wolves, people are going to be talking about captain Salah when it happens. So I think it's a case of just picking your battles is the advice. Of course, look, you can swing against him any time, but I think the message here would be that in 22, even if United don't have a double, there are people that you can swing against him should you want to in that week in any case. If the double happens, Rashford's captaincy is going to be massive and there'll be a lot of triple captaincies as well.
Indeed. Let's wrap up, James, with the last game of the weekend, the boring game. If you're an Arsenal fan, to come through, I mean, this was a very... I think Arsenal played the better football, but it felt very even in terms of chances and intensity. And United were a threat consistently because they have got good players. Anthony loves a little lollipop, though. But yeah,
I told you, Anthony is right pissed Man United fans off. That's not changed today.
I don't know how I'm saying. I feel like even though Arsenal were the better team and played the better football, it was still a little bit toe to toe. They were going at each other quite well, and in the end, Arsenal will feel like a last-minute winner against Manchester United to take 3 points over 1 is the type of thing that ends up winning titles at the end of the season. When you look back at it, keeping going till the last minute is so important, and the team did it, and they're going to take so much away from that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And in the end, they did deserve to win, despite the late nature of it, because Manchester United in that sort of final 15 minutes or so, they just could not get out. It was just under siege. And I think what's credit to Arsenal was that it wasn't just throw it in the box and hope someone gets on the end of it. And, they just kept playing through United. And it's no slight on United that they got beat by a team in the end who ultimately are better than at the moment. It was a brilliant game of football. From that, I mean, I can't say I enjoyed it. Obviously not. But it was a brilliant game of football after a weekend where I hadn't watched much good football. So from that perspective, it was certainly interesting. I think we know what Arsenal's lineup is at the moment, but there are a couple of question marks off the back of that game yesterday. Ben White had a very, very strange game. He got booked quite early on, and he had a moment a few minutes afterwards where he passed. I can't remember who it was that he passed the ball to. It might have been Fernandes. But he passed the ball straight to him under no pressure, like 10 yards in front of him. It was like he'd completely lost concentration. I think the booking and Rashford's pace, and obviously the fact Rashford had already scored that brilliant goal, felt like it really spooked him. And I think it was the right decision from Mikel Arteta to take him out of the game. Because Tomiyasu, who also had some issues with Rashford, which is understandable, Tomiyasu is a very, very good 1v1 defender. Very difficult to get past. Now, I would expect White to stay in the team, but it might be something to keep an eye on. The fact that Tomiyasu is fit. Because I don't see Zinchenko coming out of that team at the moment. It's too important in terms of they can manipulate the way they play into several different ways just through Zinchenko, which is remarkable, obviously, for a left-back. He's an outstanding player. Martinelli's obviously under a little bit of X minutes threat now from Trossard, who come on and had a very lively impact. I think there's no question mark now that Nketiah's staying in the team through the middle till Jesus is fit. And if you're looking at that Arsenal team at the moment and you're saying, okay, let's just say hypothetically they are 0-0 at Everton after 55 minutes and they're struggling, and he goes, I want to make a change. Who's going off?
I understand that.
It is also Martinelli, isn't it?
I thought about this because I'm a Martinelli owner, James. And obviously the next game being Everton, I'm thinking, all right, Martinelli's done nothing so far that means he'll get dropped.
Agree.
So if he's going to start and he's going to come up against Seamus Coleman, there is no way on earth I am selling Martinelli. Martinelli versus Seamus Coleman. You're having a laugh, mate. So I can understand why he might get hooked and what have you, but he's returned in 2 of the 5 games since the World Cup, or is it 5 games he played? He scored and assisted. Was it against Brighton? He scored against us as well. So he's returned since the World Cup. He's had 3 blanks in a row, and that's why people are getting itchy feet. But then I just look, what's happening next? Is Seamus Coleman. Yeah, well, fine.
Yeah, and it's worth acknowledging, this is really important, is that in terms of his individual matchups, obviously in the last 3 games, Martinelli's been up against world-class right-backs in the form of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who, no jokes, he's, again, like Tomiyasu, he's an outstanding 1v1 defender. Kieran Trippier has obviously improved massively. And, Matt Doherty is the other one. But you no, they've had 3 difficult fixtures, and he probably has had some different... Exactly. He's had some difficult individual matchups, and you are right to highlight that. Seamus Coleman next, and Brentford, by the way, with Rico Henry much stronger on the other side for 23 than they are on the right hand side. I should add, by the way, Brentford was unusual that Brentford played a back 3 yesterday, because they only normally do that against the top teams, which I think was a bit of a mark of respect to Leeds actually and their potential going forward. So yeah, but what I would say, Suj, is you are absolutely right about that. The only way I sell Martinelli is for another Arsenal player.
Yeah, I get that.
That's the point. I don't think
this is the week to do the sideways move necessarily.
No, I agree. I think, am I going to force that in now to, like I said, go with a 4.2 defender and force Martinelli to tackle now? I think my point would just be, where I on wildcard right now, Martinelli's not in it. I'd go a defensive Arsenal player, and I'd definitely go Odegaard and Saka. They're better right now. But then you need to be in the luxury to make that move. And let's just say, even if you were, you go, shit, I've got to get to Odegaard, or I've got to get a Saka, for example. Exactly what you said is right. Martinelli could burn Seamus Coleman and actually be the highest scoring player in the next week. So it's probably a case of just keeping your powder dry at the moment. But yes, he is the one that's the X minutes threat as well. Because you couldn't, unless they're in a position where they've got a football match won, and I mean won, they're 3-0 up against Everton, whatever, Saka and Odegaard ain't coming off that pitch. They're too good. You mentioned Anthony, right? How much did United pay for Anthony?
80 million?
Well, and then you look at his opposite number, you'd have to say, what would Saka be worth?
Forget about it. Forget about it right now. You know how the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona used to love to come to the Premier League and just take whoever the star player is at the moment. You look at Saka and you're just like, I don't think there's a price, James. I don't know what they would have to pay Arsenal for him to move. But he's so good at just his control, attacking threat. What a player.
Were he to leave, and by the way, no one's suggesting he will, but I just mean in the future, it's only going to be like that. Madrid or Barcelona, and ridiculous money, and they deem it their
couple hundred
marquee
million.
Signing or whatever. Yeah.
Crazy money.
I don't know about a couple hundred, but I think, Arsenal would be well within their rights if someone rocked up with 125 million tomorrow and just went, yeah, come back when you're being serious. If you compare that to, say, Anthony's price, for example, and probably be fair at the moment.
Or Mudryk went for just that similar.
He's frighteningly good. And to be honest, Nketiah is the one that this week has obviously returned really well. We spoke last week about this brilliant job he's doing in covering for Jesus. And you do look at it and go, as much as I want Saka and Odegaard, I'm sitting there with White Martinelli. He's the right sort of move for me this coming week, like Mitrovic to Nketiah. When, for example, I'm not going to move Rodrigo if he's got a double to Odegaard. That's a definite for me, I'd think, if it doesn't happen. But if the double does happen, if I really want to get that third Arsenal player in now, am I better off going down the Nketiah route? And then I've got no Saka or Odegaard. It doesn't feel comfortable. Saka now, I think, is he worth the extra over Odegaard? I think it's the difference between them's nice. Saka looks like he can go and explode and just kill anybody at the moment. I mean, he made Luke Shaw, has improved defensively massively for a long time. He made him look an idiot for a lot of that game yesterday. For United, I think the message to United fans will obviously be very disappointed this morning is you can definitely see progress. You can definitely see it. And we'll never know if Casemiro playing might have shut down that problem, for example, against Saka on the second goal earlier. He probably does, but it might not be in position to do it anyway. I think in games like this, Eriksen in a pivot doesn't work. I spoke on Friday's pod and the deadline stream saying that I thought he'd play higher, and I thought McTominay and Fred would both play. because at this top level, off the ball is weak. Christian Eriksen's a great footballer. He's been very good for Manchester United, and I love him for his spell at Tottenham. But in a double pivot, in a game like that, where you're under pressure, problem. And I didn't think he'd play that position. And it's not a slight on him, actually. I think it's a selection issue. But a lot of other Ten Hag selections have been obviously very good recently. I didn't think Weghorst would play. And I thought part of that would be enabling Eriksen to play higher. Do you know what? For the first hour, Suj, he was extremely good.
Yeah.
His link-up play to bring people into the game was really, really good. Would I want to dive into him for this double? No. Even if Martial was ruled out for a few weeks, I still don't think there'd be enough there to convince me that I'd want to do it. Because I'd think, later in game, once they're ahead, they'll move Rashford through the middle and stuff as well. And I think he ended up staying on yesterday because he could help with the defensive set pieces and stuff because they were under so much pressure, right? But actually, his performance was good. Really good. And Bruno Fernandes, certainly in the first half, he had moments where I thought that's more like the Bruno I know that became someone we had to be in our FPL teams and stuff. So Bruno will be the one if the double happens. If you want a differential captain, it's Bruno. I'm going to go with a herd. It will be Rashford, but I think Bruno's in a position now where we should start talking about him again. Yeah. He's returned in every game since the World Cup, and actually, if you look further back, their last defeat prior to Arsenal was at Villa, which also happened to be Ronaldo's last start. I'm pretty sure Fernandes returned in game week 16 at Fulham from memory as well. So it's actually 6 returns in a row. That's more like what we know. Would he justify that label of price tag at the moment in comparison to Saka or Odegaard? No. Can he be very good for people in game week 22? Yes. And there'll be people like me who probably can't get there. If you can, do it. Even if it's just to chain off immediately to something else, to say a Man City player for their double. Yeah. If it's for free and you can get him in and make it work for your structure, I think people should consider it. Rashford is absolutely on fire at the moment. He looks like probably as good as I've seen him. I think he's at a point now where all those injury issues he had are gone and he senses what he is, which is a brilliant technician, and he's now a powerful player to go with the pace. He strikes that ball for that shot. I can only describe it.
Right. Yeah.
I can only describe it for people who haven't seen it. Like he's going for a sprint in a cycling race, because he ends up with his head so far over his body in terms of his control. He's looking right down, but he's not, when people take a first touch and they have to look at the ball, he's doing it almost like an aerodynamic kind of, in terms of this is the best way for me technically to get the best out of striking through this ball. Very strange technique, but it works for him.
A very involuntary response to me when I was sitting there. So me and my wife were she was on the other sofa. I was sitting there on the sofa. The kids are upstairs. I just was like, wow. I was just like, wow. She's looking at me like, you're a weirdo. Why you keep saying wow? But I was just like, I didn't see that coming from anywhere. Hell of a finish. And it's a sign of a player who's just in the zone right now, in form, in the zone. And I can see why a lot of people want to captain him over of Haaland or considering it.
Unless you haven't got, and you're in a position where you've gone, right, bollocks, I'm going to swing against because that's what I need to do. And that's fine if that's the choice. But most people who haven't got him are figuring out how they're going to do it right now. I think there's every chance he'll go above 200% EO, because there will be a lot of triple captaincies and stuff next week. Ironically, and I'm not going to think about it too much, because I think there's a couple of things to factor in before people go, I'm definitely going to do it. One is they've got 3 games between now and next week. And that's, even that, who's the team you want to target most this week if they got a double? Manchester United. Okay, even if the double happens, they've got 2 games in between. You would like to think they'll get a rest against Reading. Let's say they prioritise the League Cup semi-finals. You'd like to think against Reading on Saturday, he gets a rest. That'll be enough. Because you don't want him completely rested at the moment. You want him to stay on this momentum that he's got going. So I think he plays the Forest ties, probably gets rested against Reading. If he comes through that, fine. That's absolutely perfect and acceptable. Whether I triple captain him, if he comes through that, ironically, might depend on Arsenal. And it might, ironically, depend on their result against Manchester City on Friday night. because
Okay.
the reason for that is, and I'll explain this more next week if they have one, is the possibilities of good alternative triple captaincies, I think, increase massively for Arsenal if they beat Manchester City next week. If they go out, it's possible that Arsenal will only have one good double and it could land in the week where you're setting up to bench boost, for example. So actually, the decision on Rashford, for me, might be influenced by what Arsenal do on Friday night.
Cool. James, do you want to tell the listeners what we have left lined up for this week? And I'm going to then get into. I can open it up if it makes it easier for me to tell them. I'm going to go through some of the questions that we've had in on Twitter, James, and for your benefit, I'm going to ignore all of the is North London red stuff because I think plenty have chucked those in just to,
Yeah, thanks. Cheers. No, it's not. I was asked this question last week. I looked out the window and said it was grey. Well, do you know what? Actually, today it's blue.
Blue.
People's Poll podcast tomorrow. The vote is live now to around about 5 p.m. You have 3 choices for your podcast tomorrow. The Deloitte Football Money League has been posted last week, and it's no surprise to see English clubs right near the top of that. That's on trend and topic at the moment, where I think it's like, fuck, is the Premier League literally completely pulling a rate away from La Liga and Serie A and stuff? The answer, by the way, spoiler, is yes. You can also have a podcast, should you wish, on Juventus's 15-point deduction in Serie A, which we did a podcast on Patreon right at the end of, I think, actually, no, in mid-December, I want to say, Suj, when obviously all the board resigned because they knew there was something coming. We didn't think they'd get demoted. We did think it would probably be something like this. What does it mean next? Can they appeal? Obviously, Fabio Paratici is implicated quite clearly. And there might be an interesting knock-on effect where this may affect other clubs in Italy. You can vote for that should you so want. And also, I received a DM, forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but someone DM'd me last week and said, I'd like you to have a look into Stoke City's relationship with Bet365. And I said, do you know what? That's a good topic because Bet365 have a lot of money and they have a lot of links with Stoke. But I don't think the money's being invested properly in the football club at the moment. So you can vote for that as well if you would prefer. So it's Deloitte Money League, Juventus or Stoke. Wednesday's podcast, Sky Fantasy Football. Thursday's Clash of Correspondence is Newcastle versus West Ham with Simon Bibby and Chris Stone. I will be streaming on Friday, most probably in the afternoon, with Ask James around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Patreon podcast this week. Q&A today, Suj. Tuesday, we're going to go Tottenham tomorrow, Suj. Just get it out of the way because, like, if I'm really pissed off tonight, why not just catch me first thing while I'm angry tomorrow? Wednesday's Money in Football is on China. Why did they all stop spending money suddenly? Some big transfer deals coming out of the Chinese Super League, weren't they? Why has it stopped? We're going to investigate that on Money in Football on Wednesday. Thursday's a quiz, which I can't remember what the topic is, but there's a quiz. And Friday, we're going to turn the Patreon Q&A on its head, Suj. Which I'll explain to patrons during the course of this week. But basically, we're going to ask them the questions.
Lovely jubbly. Sounds good. Quality of your life is dictated by the quality of your questions. And we've had some questions in that we're going to get through. I'm going to keep it to the more interesting ones. FPL Sponge says, have you or I, James, ever been skiing? If not, would you like to? I haven't been skiing since I was at school, mate. Since I was young. You've never been, have you?
Nah.
It's a good holiday. I enjoy going skiing, but there's a few problems with it. It's not the cheapest of holidays compared to going and sitting on a beach. Excuse me. And like when you got kids, like I need to teach my kids how to ski before I take them skiing. If you do it here, like a mate of mine did it the other year, you've got to spend like 600 quid on lessons, 500 or 600 quid getting on lessons for them each to learn how to ski before we even get on a plane and get out there. So yeah, I have been skiing. I would like to go skiing. I'm not sure when I'm going to go skiing. You?
Nah, doesn't appeal. You know me, like if there's snow, I'll be in Burnley, right? Don't know if they got ski things there or not. I doubt it. They've got a few Gregs, as I've learned.
FPL hindsight, how much would Haaland have to cost next season for you to even consider not starting with him? Anything under 16 million, he'll be straight in. But I think
16 he goes in.
When you factor in captaincy, it's kind of
It's 8
fuck
twice.
you up. Yeah.
It's 8 twice. Yeah. So I've spoken about this and listen, he won't be anywhere near that price. It'll be like 14, maybe 14 and a half. I can't believe he'd be as high as 15. So look, as long as he's in form and he's right, etc., then he's a captaincy too many weeks. They've got to price him really high and put it in a position. Look, the majority of us knew he'd be good, but let's be honest, not everyone started with him at 11.5. I'm sure the majority of those people who didn't would go back and obviously change that, right? But not everybody thought he was going to hit the ground running and do well. So can I blame them for the price they've given him? It's like people moaning about Kieran Trippier's at the moment. He's in basically 100% of teams. Okay, fine. But did we look at Kieran Trippier in pre-season and go, they've massively underpriced him? Did we look at it and go, 5 million is a brilliant price? Yeah, sure. But we all thought Reece James, Ben Chilwell, Trent, Robertson, Ivan Perisic, all these guys were going to be great, and they haven't. So, and that's part why Tripp's ownership is obviously so massive. Plus, he gets like 2 bonus points minimum every week since game week 13. So it's crazy.
Ridiculous.
He's now beaten that Andy Robertson record, and he's actually on course for most ever bonus points from any FPL player ever in a season. If he continues at his current run rate, it's astonishing. So that's why he's in 100% of teams. But if FPL make him 6 million next year, is that too expensive for a Newcastle defender? That will be a conversation, right? So, but I think with Haaland, because of the captaincy elements of the game, I think next year they've got to think about it strongly and put it in a position where there's a choice to make. And if they go in at like 13 and stuff, like I just really don't think there's any decision to be made. A lot of people will start bulking at above sort of 14 and stuff, because then you're going to have a big disparity between sort of like Haaland and Kane and stuff. And then every time you needed to sell Haaland, if he had an injury, you're probably looking at hits, because you go Haaland down to Kane at 11. Oh, I've got 3 million in the bank, etc. And then obviously if you need him back, it becomes more difficult. So I think they've got to go sort of minimum 14, or otherwise it's just going to be the same shit next year. And I would say higher. If Haaland's 15, I'd just look at it as 7. I've got 7.5 of him twice. I'm definitely having him. That would be my take.
And we're going to give the last question of the show, James, to Kartik Raja. I've got an easy answer for this, in my opinion. You might have a different. Who's the best CDM, so central defensive midfielder of all time?
Of all time?
Kante?
No.
Makelele?
I mean, to be honest, I don't even like calling Kante a central defensive midfielder, because, I mean, you want him pushing further forward, right? You don't want to stop Kante from pressing. I think Makelele is a very, very underrated one, because he kind of reinvented. He kind of invented that formation, that actual position, in the sense that he didn't move. If you look at modern day players like Casemiro and Partey, they'll occasionally get into the box, for example. Makelele, never. They literally just used to hold hands as a point of a triangle in front of Chelsea's 2 centre backs. To be right up there, best holding midfield of all time. I don't know. Could you be cheeky and put Beckenbauer in that position? But then I also feel like this is before my time, and that feels a bit naughty.
Mm.
If you're looking at Premier League players, you're talking at like Keane's, Vieira's. But then similarly, I would describe them really as central midfield players. I know, like, particularly Keane very much developed later in his career to be a little bit more like, say, what Makelele was. But actual out-and-out defensive midfield player, I mean, it rules a lot of people out that were great central midfield players. I guess, to be honest, modern day one, Busquets. Busquets would have to be right up there, I think.
Cool. I think that's it, James. We've overstretched a little bit on time, but it's all good. I hope you enjoyed the show, listeners. If you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Planet FPL. We pitch it plenty, so I'm sure you'll know some of the benefits, but Slack, prize leagues, additional content, all available for you over there. And we'll be back at you tomorrow. Make sure you vote on the People's Poll. That's at Planet FPL Pod on Twitter. Ciao for now.
Chip Strategy podcast next Thursday. Wait till then, please. Have a nice, enjoyable week, everyone. Cue music, please, man. Show.